I think for me, like if I could shift something about the environmental movement, right, it'd be shifting the obsession over recycling
Okay.
towards obsessing over healing work with our inner child. Like just like
Ooh, okay. Okay.
Okay, 1, 2, ready, go.
Welcome to the Called to Be Bad podcast. My name is Mariah Martin, and I feel called to be bad. It turns out I'm not the only one. Join us as we dig into all things bad, scandalous, deviant, you know, the stuff that makes good church folks squirm in the sanctuary. Why? Well, because sometimes the scandalous is spiritual, deviant is divine, and bad is beautiful. Say yes to the call, and let's see what holy trouble we get into today. Hi, Brian.
hey, good to be on the podcast with you.
Yeah, welcome to Called to Be Bad. So this is Brian Sauder, and is that how you say your last name? Sauder? Sauder?
Yeah, you got it. Yep, Sauder.
Sauder. Okay. It's a very Mennonite name. I feel like I should know, but I like to check because I really don't like mispronouncing people's names. So, yeah. And so Brian's going to introduce himself today.
Well, I am a Mennonite. I'm a Mennonite minister, although I didn't grow up in the Mennonite faith. I grew up in a different Anabaptist tradition called the Apostolic Christian Church of America. Maybe if the conversation gets rolling, we can really dive deep into that. But picture kind of old order Mennonite.
Okay.
And in my job, I'm the executive director of Faith in Place. Faith in Place works with people of diverse faiths. They can be Mennonite, Catholics, other Protestant churches, but Muslim, Jewish, Baha'i, you name it, people of faith gathering. We partner with them to help them be environmental advocates and to do environmental programming in their neighborhoods. And we work throughout Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And I serve and spend my time as executive director there as a environmental advocate among people of faith.
Oh, nice. Yeah, apologies. I shouldn't have assumed that you were Mennonite with your last name. That's a...
No apologies needed. I think, great-great-great-grandpa was a Mennonite, maybe in
Okay.
Baden, Germany. Don't count me on those greats, but somewhere back there, there's
Yeah.
there's Mennonite lineage.
There's Mennonite somewhere. Yeah. Excellent. I know that, Mennonites tend to have like this, I don't know. I have a friend who, his last name is not, he didn't grow up Mennonite. And so when people meet him and try to play the Mennonite game, that can feel kind of exclusive to him. So I try to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually really odd for me because like when I'm at Mennonite churches visiting, I guest preach often. Many people know Souders, but then they quickly figure out as they play the Mennonite game that they don't know my Souders.
Your Souders.
So it's like, and like I don't know
Rough.
my like genealogy. It's like my personality is not a genealogy sort of know the details. Like I have this kind of like rough sketches.
Yeah.
So yeah, that game is very difficult to play for me.
Yeah. Shoot. Well, yeah, your history and religious upbringing would be really interesting. And maybe it'll tie in, but today we're talking about being a bad environmentalist, which I'm very excited to talk about. And I have thoughts about where it's going to go, so it will be interesting to see if it goes the way I was planning or not, if you will flip the script. But before that, I'm curious what you are drinking today.
Well, so I was coming to work this morning talking to a friend, and the friend's like, "Did you know that Starbucks has the new red cups out as of today?" And I thought, I want some coffee, and I'm going on a podcast called Called to Be Bad
Yeah.
to talk about being a bad environmentalist. So I was like, I'm stopping. I'm getting the venti blonde roast and the red cup of Starbucks today to really just, really launch us off as a bad environmentalist this morning.
Yeah.
Bad in the way of, this probably legitimately is a little bad, I would say.
Because it's like disposable, or because it's supporting a corporation like Starbucks, or...
Yeah, I think because
Yes.
we're just fully in the system here supporting, the Starbucks corporation, but then also, we'll have, some of this is recyclable, some of it is not, so we're really just diving right in.
Yeah. And who knows about Starbucks practices of where like they source their beans? I mean, maybe some people know. I don't know. And so there could be environmental questions about that.
Well, it's like anything, right? Everything has environmental questions, from the computers we're on, the headphones we're wearing, the keyboards we're typing on, the chairs we're sitting on, the rooms we're sitting in.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I saw this a comic, and it was of someone biking to an environmental protest, not protesting the environment, but protesting pollution, I guess I should say. And then someone was dissecting about like, oh, they have a MacBook in their bike rack, and they, the materials made for the bike is like bad. Anyways, just like noting how everything we do has an impact on the environment. So my drink. I have coffee as well. I have a little like floral mug. I was like, environment, flowers. So it's one of my favorite mugs. It's got blue and orange and pink flowers. And yeah, just have my regular coffee. So that's me today.
Well,
I need to switch it up because people often have exciting things and I just have coffee, but I really like my coffee. I don't know. Hello, beloved baddies. A quick break to tell you that this episode is sponsored by the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul, a nonprofit that supports and amplifies the voices of edgewalkers through art that catalyzes change, laughter that brings us together, and a soul awakening to the creative spark within us. The support from the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul has meant the world to this podcast, so I highly encourage you to check out their website, arthumorandsoul.com, to see their other featured artists and projects. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon or get in touch. Now I'll let you get back to this episode of Called to Be Bad. Let's start at the beginning. We already kind of got the ball rolling, but how do you define environmentalism, and what does it mean to be? Do you consider yourself an environmentalist? Is that like in your job description?
Yeah, definitely yes. I consider myself an environmentalist. It's so interesting though. So growing up the way I did, environmentalists were considered those people. And that was meant in a very sort of pejorative, like those people who tell us, make our lives miserable as we're farming, and those hippies, those, liberals. I mean, you can easily imagine, like, coming from a fairly conservative, sheltered background like I do, how that was seen, and I knew it very practically because I am allergic to bean and corn pollen. So while I, was raised in the country, my dad was an electrician, my family's uncles took over farms. I worked as a diesel mechanic through high school on combines and tractors, but I was always miserable because I was like sneezing and puffy in the face around corn and bean pollen. So I was like, what can I do, that's like not related to the ag industry, coming from a small town? And I liked fishing, and I liked being outdoors in the woods, and I found a peace and calm there that like grounded me, centered me.
Yeah. So
a guidance counselor was like, well, you can be a fisheries biologist. So I went to the big liberal university of Champaign-Urbana, the University of Illinois, which was an hour and a half drive away. And my parents were like super supportive. They like took me, we talked to a professor, and they're like, well, you need to enroll in the environmental science program. And that's when Grandpa was like, you're going to go be an environmentalist? Like, we need you to be a family mechanic, not not the person that makes mechanics' lives miserable.
Yeah.
But that was my journey. I enrolled in environmental science and started studying these things, and had a very, environmentalists were still those other folks for me. Like, I remember there was a Center for Environmental Concerns on campus, and they were always gathering together, partying together, like planning protests together. And meanwhile, I was going to hymn sings and like raking leaves for the elderly on Saturday and like doing those things. But I was learning this information about climate change, environmental injustice, and learning about how the impacts of that impact the least of those among us, the most vulnerable communities. And this really had like this awakening, like, wait, like what does my faith have to say about this data I'm learning in school? And that launched me on a whole journey of trying to answer this question that you just asked me. what is an environmentalist? So I don't have a good clear answer, but I've been on that journey now for a while since college.
So you're kind of discovering what it means to be an environmentalist. Like it's an ongoing thing for you?
I think so, because there's so many different types of environmentalists, and there's so much shame wrapped up in the environmental movement. And this is maybe where we can talk about what a bad environmentalist. I have this distinct memory when early on in my career, I was at our state house in Illinois, as our official like policy coordinator at the organization. We were organizing people of faith to speak out at the state house, but partnering with all these other amazing environmental advocates and lobbyists, from Sierra Club, from NRDC, from the Environmental Law and Policy, like all these professional. And I was like in my 20s, like just like excited to hang out with these really cool, amazing environmental advocates. And I was just like worried, like, what are they going to think about the suit I'm wearing? Or like, I have this like distinct memory of all of us getting in a van together to like go to an event. And I'm just like worried, like, wait, we're all like, I'm an environmentalist and we're all driving to an event. Like, how can this be? Which I think speaks towards like this sort of like notion that environmentalists, are somehow outside of the system that we all swim in, and are like somehow better than the system, right? And like somehow more pure and more holy, maybe would be language. And in practicality, that's just not true. As environmentalists, we're all complicit in this system. We do have choices, right? I have a choice to purchase from Starbucks this morning or not. And I did. But I also I have a choice, right, of being on my MacBook with you in this podcast, which I chose to do.
Yeah.
And I just think that shame and like sort of individualism within the environmental movement is really problematic. I think the more we can shed that and just acknowledge and accept that we're part of a broader system that we're trying to shift, I think the more successful we are as environmentalists in achieving our goals, which are to have a more healthy planet for our future generations and current generations, to have clean air, to have water that's drinkable, to have food, that's produced from land that's healthy for us, to have vibrant communities, healthy communities, that sort of thing. So I think about environmentalism in kind of these terms, and you see different streams of environmentalism from folks who are more in like deep ecology, kind of rebel, live outside of the system, folks that are really obsessed about recycling, folks that are like trying to work at systemic sort of change. There's a mosaic, different sort of approaches to the environmental movement and specific environmentalists within it.
So if there was less focus on being a good or perfect environmentalist about doing absolutely no harm, because then if you fail at that, then there's shame. So if there was less focus on like a shame-based environmentalism, you think that we would all be more effective environmentalists, or yeah?
Yeah, I think maybe our focus would be more appropriate. I would tell you, like, there's some startling stats out there, right? Like, there's 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Like 100 companies are responsible for 71%, and yet we're obsessed over like reducing each other's individual carbon footprint, which is like such a drop in the bucket. And then like it becomes like a thing. I remember like going to a faith and place. I'm often visiting churches. We're in communities, hosting events, talking about these issues. And I can't tell you how many times, I'll show up at an event and, someone who's trying to be nice will bring some water bottles. And the environmentalist in the room, somebody undoubtedly starts to scold them. And it's just like, y'all, like this righteous upset is really misplaced. Someone was trying to be nice and brought some water so people could have, something to drink. And instead of like us, strategically building a grassroots movement that's powerful, that's focused on these companies that are causing an unhealthy future, we get distracted by like being more pure than the other person, or like finding purpose and scolding. We work with it's about 287 different green teams. So these are faith communities that have committed committee that's meeting regularly, talking to our coaches. And we really believe in coaching, because one of the first things we have to do with many of our green teams is we have a 10 tips sheet, and it actually says this on the 10 tips, is like, don't scold. Meet people where they're at. Let's talk about this as a big bigger issues from the lens of justice, like
Right.
like scolding myself doesn't lead to behavior change. Why would I think scolding anybody else leads to any sort of behavior change?
I love that. Yeah.
See. So that's just a kind of a normal thing. The other experience I have, and obviously I'm passionate about this because I'm just talking,
Go.
but
Just do it. Go.
but,
I
like,
write stuff down so that I don't interrupt you and I can bring it up later.
no,
Yeah.
feel free to interrupt too. Like,
No, it's all good.
I can't tell you how predictable it is. I'll go and preach a sermon at a church, and it's a new contact, and the children's story will be done, and it's like Brian's coming. He's the environmental preacher. Everybody's expecting Wendell Berry and just like kind of some beautiful poetic prose, and like the children's story time will happen, and 9 out of 10 times the children's story time is about recycling, and it's interesting to me like that. Like our green teams face this problem too. They get labeled very quickly as a recycling committee.
Oh.
And when people think green and think environmental, they think recycling. And the data shows us that you could do all the recycling in the world. Like it used to be a few years ago, it was like 9% of things that are put in the recycling bucket get actually recycled, reused. A new study just came out recently, it was like 5% down across the US.
Gosh.
So all that effort that, a green team's going to help your church have recycling bins is really valid and cool. But it does not have the impact that we think it's like. So and then I stand up and I preach a sermon about empire and oppression and how the system is winning if it's got us obsessing over recycling and paper straws and individualism, because then the fossil fuel companies can continue to do what they're doing, and we just get obsessed with nitpicking each other and not obsessed with the system that's been placed on us, that's oppressing us, that's keeping us from being free and having the healthy communities that we want.
Yeah. Oh, that's so discouraging because I feel like recycling is like one thing that I feel like I can do as an individual that I feel like, okay, well, at least it's not going into the landfill. And I'm sure it's better to reduce waste in general, that I don't have things to recycle or throw away. But then, to hear that your individual efforts are basically futile is it's discouraging.
Well, and I don't want to be I have to always kind of be careful. Like, I'm not the anti-individualist, environmentalist person, because like both are important, right? And, like living out our values and embody them and struggling with them. But I think it's really a consciousness thing. Like, it's so important to be conscious that I'm doing this recycling act. I do it in solidarity with the poor and with those who have landfills in their backyard, right? And that's impacting them. And I'm doing that to keep as much waste as possible out of the landfill.
Yeah.
But I am very clear-eyed that unless we get some policy change, that number is going to be 5 to 10%. We need to get to 25%, 30%, 50%. There's other countries that are doing that are getting it to 80%, 90%. It's possible, but just me individually doing this thing isn't going to make that system change.
Right.
I don't know what the data is. I saw, a meme. I have no clue if it's based in fact, so I'm just going to throw it out there. But you can make an argument that the most powerful thing you can do as an individual for the environment is vote for an environmental candidate, and that has 1,000 impact to the individual behavior that you have. We can have that sort of conversation, but there are things that we can do as individuals, with agency, with consciousness, that both have a small impact and live out our values, but also have a larger impact too. There's ways that we can take action.
Right.
And that's really what Faith and Place tries to do. As we coach our green teams, we're trying to help them think in those bigger picture and move towards that with that sort of vision of, yes, we're going to do the programming here in the community, but we're going to do it in a way that models and witnesses to a larger system that helps bring about that change.
Yeah. So there's the individual and all the efforts that you can put into place to just take care of the earth and be conscious about how we interact with creation. And there's the systemic level of the sun is really in my face right now. Environment. So then there's systemic level of corporations. So this is where this is coming from. So I remember when I was little, I read this book, and it was about littering. And the one person was telling the other not to throw their gum on the floor. And they're like, it's just one piece of gum, like on the grass or whatever. And they're like, what's just one gum wrapper or piece of gum? And they're saying, well, if everyone did that, then there would be gum everywhere and you'd be stepping on it and be sticky and it'd be gross. And I think about that a lot. And like, if there was this like collective care for the environment, could that amount to a systemic level? But not doing that in like a shaming way of like, but if all of us would be kind of bad environmentalists or imperfect environmentalists, could that at a collective level add up and make a difference? Or is it just more efficient to just to vote or to put our attention on more systemic, like these 100 corporations or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a both and, right? Like it's both growing the individual effort, consciousness, working together, but also then being strategic on the systems level. Because like in your kind of analogy, right, it would be, hey all, we need to all stop throwing our gum on the floor. But meanwhile, you have companies who are like, just like with a fire hose of gum,
Right.
just spraying the gum everywhere.
Yeah.
And like you and I are just like lecturing each other about like, hey, we should have put the gum on the floor.
Gum. Yeah.
It is like,
we're like drowning in gum. Like,
yeah, you
like,
like,
spit out your gum. Yeah.
Right.
That's hilarious.
It is kind of funny. We should talk about what type of gum this would be, right? Like, is it like bubblicious?
Right. Cinnamon.
Cinnamon gum, right?
I used to chew cinnamon gum a lot. I miss that. I should get that again. Although, I've heard that gum is basically like plastic and doesn't biodegrade. So, should we chew gum? Anyways, this is
why Mom always said, "Don't swallow that gum," right?
Yeah, because then you're just swallowing plastic or whatever.
But it is something that I think about a ton. Is I think a lot about how effective the NRA is. This is out of nowhere, but like the NRA has 5 million members in a country that has, don't quote me on these numbers, but 300 million people in the population. Think about how powerful that group of single issue. We vote based on the Second Amendment. We post. We do all the things that we do. Our identities kind of wrapped up in the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms and all this sort of. Think about how powerful that group of 5 million people is, because they're laser focused on legislation. And they're laser focused on systemically like protecting their guns, right? And it's such a small percentage of people. So like I think often about, as we build grassroots movements that yes are living out our values in community and our individual lives. But if we do it strategically so that we're like laser focused on, we vote for environments, we watch you as elected officials on the issue of environments. We see this environmental issue connected to racism. We see it connected to the ways that communities have air pollution, have basement flooding, have access to local food, have like these things, matter to us, and we want to see you take action on them. Just growing that movement can have such a profound effect. The passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, which includes, all this money for solar energy, renewable energy, is going to have profound influence, and it's going to really magnify, us as individuals putting solar panels up on our churches, up on our own homes, but it's going to take that times 1,000, because that pressure, this happened in that one instance. Think about that, doing that again and again. It's an exciting sort of thing.
So you are calling for individuals coming together and having a singular focus and putting all our energy into one area, and that would have more of an impact than kind of a scattered worry about making sure we're recycling that water bottle or whatever.
Yeah, and I think we have to. I mean, the existential threat of climate change that we're facing is imminent. It's already happening, right? Like a third of Pakistan is underwater. I mean, we're so numb to these things, but the hurricanes, the flooding, all the sort of things that we're seeing are just getting worse, and this has profound impacts on all of us individually. Yeah, I think we do the things, and at Faith and Place we have a model. We meet people where they are, and some people just aren't there yet, where they understand what's happening with climate change and why this is an urgent sort of threat to our very existence and our way of living and our desire to have healthy community together. And so we work on the smaller program things, and that's beautiful, and it's prioritizing building relationships and understanding and building bridges and unpacking the ways that mass media is influencing our understanding of these various issues. But yeah, we need to move. We need to
Yeah.
move. And we need to be focused. I don't know if the focus is singular, but the focus is full of intention about changing things as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard lots of talk about like eco anxiety. Like I think especially, well, I see it like on TikTok, and so I think it's geared toward younger generation. I guess anyone can be on TikTok. Never mind. Just having all of this anxiety around climate change and not knowing how to help and not knowing what to do. And I think that kind of anxiety can lead to paralysis or what was the word that you said, like numb, like how we're numb to hearing, oh, there's another flood, there's another fire. So what do we do with that anxiety?
Well, we're two ministers talking. I think this is such an opportunity for the church to lead. I really do. My conviction is that the ecological crisis is a spiritual crisis. These two things are intertwined, and I really think our spiritual crisis is we've lost connection with ourselves.
Okay.
We've lost connection with each other. We've lost connection to Mother Earth. And I think as we seek to heal those connections to ourselves, to each other, to the earth, I think we also heal our ecological anxiety or climate grief. I think we create spaces. We have millennia of wisdom in our spiritual traditions that teach us how to lament, right, and how to accept emotions and how to not shove aside the grief, the anger, the despair, but to bring them to the light, right, and to bring them in light and community with each other and to heal with each other. And I just think, in a time when our spiritual communities are really missing it, and we're seeing that, and attendance dropping and different things, I think this is such an opportunity for us to reimagine what church looks like in the context of our ecological crisis and to really focus on healing together. That really excites me, that sort of notion and reimagination gets me excited. It's a little like, kind of maybe dangerous to say out loud because people are like, oh, the environmentalist over there not only wants us to change the whole system, but also change how we do church and all these things. But I think I'm willing to go there and willing to have those conversations and explore what that might look like.
But yeah, I'm curious, like, say more about that, about how this is not only an environmental crisis but a spiritual crisis, like how those two are connected, and then what your vision of how the church could be involved in environmentalism, like what that would look like.
Yeah, and I think, Faith and Place works in a multi-faith context too. So I think it's not only the church, but just our faith and spiritual traditions to teach us. And it doesn't matter if you're Mennonite or you're Jewish or you're Muslim or you're Baha'i. I think part of the beauty of multi-faith work is you learn, yes, about each other's tradition, but you learn from each other. And, that multi-faith aspect is just really beautiful. I think for me, like, if I could shift something about the environmental movement, right, it'd be shifting the obsession over recycling towards obsessing over healing work with our inner child. Just like
Okay.
the violence we commit to ourselves, I promise you, is connected to the violence that we commit to the earth.
And, oh my goodness.
And then, like I'm convinced if you look at corporations are just magnifications of our internal selves, right? Like this, and it's magnified times 1,000. And so corporations are committing violence to the earth. I promise you, they are founded on individuals who also are unhealed in their violence to themselves, right? And that's getting magnified out through structures and sort of things. And I think our spiritual traditions are our, speaking as a Mennonite minister, our
Mm-hmm.
faith in Jesus and the restoration work that Jesus, embodies for us and models for us of healing through pain and resurrection and new life. I think all of these have profound things to say for us, not only as individuals in healing our relationship with ourselves, but then that leads to a more healed relationship with each other, right? The more I've experienced this in my own growth journey, the more grounded I am in myself, the more in tune I am with myself, the easier my relationships are with others because I recognize what's their stuff, what's my stuff. I can do a sort, right? And I firmly believe that also has profound impacts on how I run my business, how I relate to the earth, how I connect with the outdoors, how I'm in solidarity with outdoors, but yet understand how I'm different. I think these things are really profound. And I would just love our faith communities to get open about that, real about that, talk about it, explore what we've learned from the wisdom of the ages, from our biblical texts, from our commentaries, from our traditions. These things really offer a lot of, to me, excitement about what spirituality looks like going forward in the future.
No, that is really exciting because it's a much more integrated approach to life and this work rather than like compartmentalizing of like I am recycling to save the earth, and that is separate from my spirituality, from my trauma healing, and in fact like what you're pointing out is that it's all connected. Violence that we do to ourselves can be connected to violence we do to the earth. Harm breeds more harm, and so working on like healing yourself is also environmentalist work. I mean, we are part of creation.
Yeah, right?
We are part of the environment. Anyways, I'm just like making those connections with you, or trying to.
Yeah, and I think, imagine a church community where you attend and you get to do some healing work in community with each other. And while you're doing that, you're also doing healing work in your neighborhood, right? Like as heat days get hotter, you're thinking about, oh wow, we can do work around providing a cooling center in our community, or as systems might shut down, as we saw in the pandemic around local food systems. Oh, we're starting a farm so that we have some resiliency in the local food system as a part of our spiritual tradition, as part of our faith. These sort of things are like, as climate refugees come to the Midwest because other areas become less sustainable, we're thinking about how do we welcome them in a way that they feel, that's designed for them, that's provides housing, that does these things. I mean, I think this is kind of the spirituality that naturally attracts me, and I think it's just very different than this notion of like, oh, we have an environmental program of the church. It's more of a holistic, like, maybe this is what we're coming to be an imperfect environmentalist means to connect all these dots together and to boldly proclaim them as all environmental. And this isn't original to me. Pope Francis built on this in his encyclical called Laudato Si, where he titled it integral ecology, an ecology that's integrated into all aspects of life and connected, which I think is beautiful in a way.
Yeah, that flipped some switch in my brain that I hadn't thought about, because I think I have a little bit been like I've gone in stages of like really trying to reduce waste, and not saying that I should stop doing that, but kind of being that more extreme. Like I think I literally remember being with a friend, and I should probably call her and apologize, and we were talking about environmentalism, and she was like, well, I don't know, it was something about, and I was like, well, it is better, it is like more ethical, it is better to not get the takeaway plastic, to actually, like, I don't know, grow food in your own garden and eat that, and kind of having that like environmentalism, moral superiority complex, and I think it's rooted in like I want this earth to continue on. I want to care for the earth, and kind of like that fervor that comes with that, which I don't think is bad, but like, can we shift that away from shaming others, scolding others, as you were saying, to like put that energy into my own healing, put that energy into community, faith community work and care for one another and the earth. I don't know what I'm saying here. I'm just like
I,
processing what you were saying.
I think you're saying it beautifully. I'm resonating with what you're saying, so I'm hearing it back in a way that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And it reminds me, I think, my own journey. Initially, and there's probably still parts of this that are very, very true. I think I was attracted to environmentalism because I come. How do I say this respectfully? I come from a faith tradition, right, where your appearance, the way you dress, kind of the lifestyle is all designed in a way to make you feel better than other folks. Kind of to set you apart and to find purpose and meaning, all good things. And I think coming from that formation, for me, I think one of the things that attracted me initially to environmentalism was you get to be better than folks. You get to be superior to folks, is what you said. And I do,
Yes.
because you get to be right. You get to scold people about the water
And then you
bottle.
became a pastor, which
And
that
then I
has
became a pastor.
nothing to do with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think all of that is born out of a deep, feeling of being inferior, of being broken, of being, all these sort of things. And so healing that
Yeah.
allows one to kind of shed the shame, remove the shoulds. One of my basic green team coaching tips is stop shoulding all over everybody and all over yourselves. Like that does not
Yes.
need to change. But I think that comes from my own personal journey of healing. Like I'm okay, I'm whole and complete. Like, and coming from that place, then I can make a much more conscious decision. Like, for me as an environmentalist, I want to have a community where I have good music, good food. I'm living healthy. I feel great. I can walk places. I know my neighbors. Like, isn't that a compelling vision? That to me is what environmentalism is all about. We're about having an amazing community together. That's where you have clean air to breathe. You got water to drink. You got concerts. You got walkable cities. You got all the that stuff's exciting. And notice I didn't say we have the correct colored recycling bins in the corner. I think that becomes a natural byproduct, because of course we do in our healthy community. We're focused on the healthy community and feeling good about ourselves and healed together. Anyway, I don't know if
No, that makes sense. And also, I appreciate that view because I think there is also privilege that comes along with trying to be more environmentally friendly and end up being environmentally superior. There's again TikTok. I learned so much from TikTok. Whatever. Don't be embarrassed.
I'm on TikTok all the
Are
time.
you okay?
I
Got a
got
fellow TikToker.
I got my own Instagram Reels game going on. So we can
I
make it
need to
happen.
follow you on Instagram. Follow Called to Be Bad. What are we doing?
What are we doing here? Yeah.
I'm having so much fun making reels for Called to Be Bad. That's a side note here.
That's great.
But I had a point. I really did. Environmentally superior, privilege, TikTok. Oh yes, okay. So this creator, she talks about cleaning from a very shame-free perspective, and she talks about if you are depressed, your priority isn't going to be she encourages you to use disposable dishware as long as you're feeding your body. That is what takes priority. And so I think there is an inherent level of privilege, the knowledge of what to recycle, having access to clean water so you don't have to buy bottled water. That is a privilege. So I appreciate your emphasis on community, because that is more of an equalizer, rather than these elite who will probably be able to buy their way out of if we have kind of apocalyptic environmental crisis, they will be able to move, they will be able to have access to resources to survive. So anyways, the emphasis on community is much more of an equalizer. And okay, if there is environmental collapse, that's how we're gonna survive. Just to take this that far, in my mind, if we have strong communities and are able to band together. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think so. The difference between being superior or inferior, I think, is for me mutuality. Mutuality is all about relationships, and this is something I talk about, as executive director of Faith and Place all the time. The community we're building of a green team network across these 3 states that are doing our programming and advocacy work are getting to know each other, and they're getting to know each other and finding out, turns out the green team dynamics in a mosque are very similar to the green team dynamics in a Lutheran church or a Mennonite church. It's all like just kind of like working within the system, trying to change the system, trying to meet people where they're at and go further. But you get to know your neighbor, and you get to love your neighbor, right? And I think, all the statistics show that in time of crisis, the people who survive are the people who know their neighbors. Because you're in it together, and you love each other, and you're in this community together, right? And so you support each other, you pool resources, you make sure each other is okay. But it's when we isolate and when we get alone and when we're disconnected, back to the spiritual crisis, is when the things don't go well. Things don't go well. There isn't that sense of community, and community's hard, right? Like you got to be doing the work. You got to be unpacking a lot of different things in order to be in relationship with each other, even especially in our polarized times, right? Where it's so easy to walk away from each other and to isolate from each other and to stay in your own little bubble. It takes courage. It takes hard work, but I think it's essential. And I guess what I'm realizing I'm offering to you and the listeners is this is what it means to be an environmentalist. I think, to be an environmentalist is to have this courage to be in relationship with each other. And I guess to your point, to be in a relationship across communities, one of the beauties of the Faith and Place Green Team Network is many of our green teams are in what we call environmental injustice communities that have 4 times the air pollution, communities that have the heavy industry, the diesel truck traffic, because of the disinvestment. Their basements flood more often because the cities, have not invested in the infrastructure that's there. But to be in a relationship is so like honoring and beautiful, and to understand like, oh my God, our inferiority and superiority also manifests itself in how we set up communities, and the violence that we commit to ourselves also shows up in the way that we set up communities where there's like a slow violence and racism and disinvestment and these sort of things. And you kind of I think to be environmentalist is to understand how connected everything is, and maybe this is the way to think about I remember studying ecology in undergrad, and really ecology is a study of understanding how everything's connected. And this is kind of an ecology that's a little bit more holistic and broader. So I think we're an hour in, and I finally defined for you what I think an environmentalist is.
That's beautiful. So an environmentalist is someone that recognizes that everything is connected?
Yeah,
Can we say it in one sentence, or?
Yeah, an environmentalist is a courageous individual who understands that everything is connected and chooses to live for a more healthy community.
So what's a bad environmentalist then?
I mean, well, it depends how we define it. I think it's the same thing, right? Because we're defining bad as someone who's willing to accept their imperfections and to shed shame. I think, an annoying environmentalist is one who gets obsessed over little things, but I love them too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I was. It's interesting because I came to this episode kind of wanting. So I struggle with, and I hear this in sermons a lot, especially about environmentalism. There's sermons of like, this is bad, this is worse, this is terrible, freak out about all these things. And I, when I hear stuff like that, like I feel it in my body, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the world is burning. And then I kind of go into this like, I can't do anything about it, and I do nothing. And so I really appreciate when there's like, these are concrete things that you can do that are helpful. and not just left kind of drowning in bubblegum, if you will. And so I was kind of wanting to come, like, I wanted to come to this episode saying, like, okay, so what is something concrete that we can give our listeners? And you did. I predicted it. You flipped the script, as in, like, it's not about like, okay, this is the best way to recycle, or buy this light bulb because it is more efficient. It is more about healing, seeing those connections, seeing how it's all. Take a shot every time I say connected. It's there is a more integrated way of doing environmentalism that perhaps is more effective or more sustainable or less shameful. Are you tracking? Am I getting it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think my vision here is that the faith community really leads the way in this, and that we, I cringe because I've done it myself in my own journey. I preach those sermons, right, where it's just the apocalypse, and it's not, that the sermon setting isn't conducive to creating space to grieve and to accept and to be brave, like to build courage. And so, I like to think about, because I think we need to courageously look at the facts and where we're heading and what science is telling us. But I think as spiritual communities, we can do that in a way that I keep coming back to Lamentations, like a way that we can lament with each other, a way that we can remind each other that actually having these feelings are God's gifts to us to process and to heal. And that we don't need to shove down the despair that we do feel. We don't need to shove down the sadness and the hurt and the scaredness that we all feel. Rather, let's bring it to light in community and see each other and be more vulnerable with each other. And by doing so, we can move through it together. And we can say, okay, this is what we're facing. But now we can actually do some of these beautiful things of building community together. Now we know how to love each other more deeply, because I understand the pain that you're feeling when you hear these facts. As opposed to, like, someone hears me preach and I give all those facts and they go home and, rightfully so, just like hide under the covers, which I'm not blaming anybody for, but like, cause like, what do I do with this information other than hide? We as spiritual communities, I think, can create something different that's more knowing of each other, vulnerable, and also healing, and allows us to take some next steps together in that community. To me, I long for that. I guess I long for that. I don't really see it a lot, but I see us getting closer to it on occasion in the network that we're building at Faith in Place and some of our green teams. And I think those are the things that really I hold on to and want to be involved in.
Caring for the environment by feeling your feelings.
Hey,
actually living integrated. Man, how rude. No. No, that's good. That's right up my alley. Yeah. Wow,
it's really a courageous path, right? I mean, it's not that different than, well, maybe it is different, but we do have, as Mennonites, an example of a individual by the name of Jesus who walked a courageous path that through pain, found new life. And I, for me, in my own spirituality, that means something for me.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I appreciate that you like, I had a question asking you about, like, how do you think about this in a spiritual perspective and theological, but that just, like, it's just already there, like, you don't have to go that extra step. It's just already there. It's already a part of everything. So I ask everyone on the that comes on the podcast, like, what would you say if someone said that you were a bad, pastor, person, whatever identifier, whatever identity kind of would cut close to your heart, because you care about the environment. So, like, say there's someone that's like, okay, God will take care of everything, or, maybe they don't even believe in science, or I don't know what percentage of folks listening to this podcast that would be them, but I guess maybe that's a separate question of, like, My brain was like, shun the non-believer. I don't know what is happening. Let me try that again. Yeah. What would you say if someone called you a bad pastor, per se, for your environmentalism?
Yeah. Well, I've been on a journey with this because, I mean, I feel like that's been a real thing for me in the church community that I grew up in. In college, I ended up leaving that church community because I wanted to be an environmentalist. And actually, it was a very wise elder in that church who sat me down. He's like, Brian, if you really feel that Jesus is calling you to do ministry and environmental work, it's just not going to happen here in this church community. And he actually told me, he's like, you can go be a Christian elsewhere. And like at the time, like it was such a beautiful thing to say. I mean, it was very permission giving because it just like sparked my imagination and allowed me to think about, oh wow, I'm feeling bad for being an environmentalist and caring about this in this community. Someone just told me, you can go pursue this because you feel Jesus is calling you towards it, and you don't have to be there. Now that there was the only path out was through excommunication and like that sort of thing. But it was by my choice. It was by choice,
Right.
the way that I wanted to pursue that. But now I wear that as a really beautiful part of my story. Like in a part of a healing journey that I've been on of accepting that and in a really deep, compassionate sort of way. It's an ongoing sort of compassion, acceptance journey for sure. But it's also a part of my identity. It's part of my story. It's part of who I am. So I would like to think if somebody called me a bad environmentalist today, I would smile and be like, hey, I'm happy to talk with you more about that. But I would like to think I wouldn't be threatened by it because I've kind of been there, done
You've
that.
been through the worst. I think you win the award. Like, you've been excommunicated. Like, what? Like,
I'm not sure, like, that's
what else can you do? Bring
yeah,
it.
like,
Like,
that's
wow.
been a journey already.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. So do you have any, just like wrapping up here, if that works for you, do you have any final thoughts or any resources or any advice to leave our listeners and viewers with?
Yeah, definitely love to have people get involved with Faith in Place. It's an amazing nonprofit organization. We have staff working all across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. So if you're in those states, you can get connected with those staff members. Get a green team started at your local church. Provide the kind of coaching service to help. We're coaching 280 plus green teams, so we've learned a lot of wisdom over the 20 years of how to be an effective green team and how to move this way. So love to get more people involved at their local congregational level into our network. A network where you're hearing from my perspective is a network about community and about getting to know each other and building bridges to different communities, different faith traditions. We have green teams that are rural, semi-urban, urban as well, racially diverse. So this is a beautiful, beautiful community I'd love for folks to get involved in. If you're not in one of those 3 states, still check out our website. We have lots of free curriculum, resources. There's also, we're part of a larger network called Interfaith Power and Light. And there's a lot of local Interfaith Power and Light affiliates in the different states throughout the country. So folks can check out Interfaith Power and Light and get involved in that way. So I think it's a general invitation to get involved. I don't know when this podcast is going live, but if it's before Election Day, go vote, please. Go vote. Those are my final sort of resources and calls to action.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. Well, would it be okay, Brian, if I end us today with a blessing for you and all of our viewers and listeners?
Absolutely.
Okay. Brian and all of you baddies out there, may you go from this episode with permission to be a bad environmentalist. And with that comes the opportunity to feel your feelings, to do some inner child work, to connect with your neighbor, with your community, and to know that you are held and good as you are. Amen.
Amen.
That's all for this episode of Called to Be Bad. Keep being your bad, beautiful selves, and I will see you next time.